Digital fortresses. How AI protects the wealth of the future elite than the shadowed corridors of Swiss private banks. Behind encrypted servers humming in unmarked data centers across Singapore and Luxembourg, and within the sterile conference rooms of family offices that manage wealth so vast it could reshape nations. A revolution is quietly unfolding. While you sleep, while you work your net to fire, while you worry about monthly bills and retirement savings, artificial intelligence is being weaponized by the world's elite to construct digital fortresses so impenetrable, so sophisticated, that they make the legendary Swiss banking secrecy laws look like child's play. What I'm about to reveal to you exists in a realm where trillion-dollar dynasties converge with quantum computing, where algorithms worth more than entire countries' GDP operate in complete darkness, and where the very concept of financial transparency has become nothing more than a quaint relic for the masses. You see, the game has changed. The old methods of hiding wealth, the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the shell companies layered like Russian dolls across jurisdictions, the numbered accounts whispered about in Zurich's banking districts, these are now merely the foundation, the crude tools of yesterday's financial architects. Today's ultra-wealthy have transcended these primitive structures. They've embraced a new paradigm where artificial intelligence doesn't just manage their wealth, it makes it invisible, untraceable, and legally untouchable in ways that would have made the Rothschilds weep with envy. I've spent months diving into leaked documents, tracing blockchain transactions that lead to nowhere, speaking with former employees of family offices who speak only in hushed tones and encrypted messages. What emerges is a picture so disturbing, so perfectly orchestrated, that it challenges everything we think we know about wealth inequality, about justice, about the very nature of the economic system that governs our lives. The elite haven't just rigged the game. They've created an entirely new game with rules written in code that only they understand. Let me take you back to understand how we arrived at this digital crossroads. The foundations were laid decades ago when families like the Rockefellers pioneered the art of wealth preservation through complex trust structures. John D. Rockefeller Sr. didn't just amass the largest fortune in modern history. He created a blueprint for perpetual wealth that his descendants still follow today, through a labyrinthine network of foundations, trusts, and holding companies. The Rockefeller fortune was atomized, dispersed across hundreds of legal entities, each serving as both a shield and a weapon in the family's arsenal of financial warfare. But the Rockefellers were mere students compared to the true masters of financial invisibility, the Rothschild dynasty. For over 2 centuries, this family has perfected the art of wealth concealment to such a degree that estimating their true fortune remains impossible. Their methodology was revolutionary for its time. Create banks in multiple jurisdictions, establish communications networks that operated faster than governments, and most importantly, never allow the complete picture to exist in any single location or document. Each Rothschild bank operated independently, yet in perfect coordination, creating a financial web so complex that unraveling it would require resources that no government possessed. These historical examples provided the template, but they were constrained by the limitations of their era: physical documents that could be stolen, human intermediaries who could be compromised, and communication systems that governments could intercept. The ultra-wealthy of today face no such limitations. They operate in a realm where information can be fragmented across thousands of servers, where transactions can be executed through quantum encrypted channels, and where artificial intelligence can create and dissolve legal entities faster than any human regulator could possibly track. The transformation began, innocuously enough, with the digitization of traditional offshore banking. Countries like Switzerland, long the guardians of financial secrecy, found themselves under increasing pressure from international regulators demanding transparency. The implementation of the Common Reporting Standard, the end of numbered accounts, the aggressive pursuit of tax evaders by agencies like the IRS, all of these developments threatened to expose the carefully constructed wealth preservation strategies that had served the elite for generations. Rather than adapting to this new transparency, the ultra-wealthy chose revolution. They migrated their strategies from the physical world to the digital realm, where the rules of engagement were still being written and where technological sophistication trumped regulatory oversight. The first wave of this migration involved cryptocurrency, but not in the way most people imagine. While retail investors bought Bitcoin on exchanges hoping to get rich quick, sophisticated family offices were using cryptocurrency as a medium for value transfer between jurisdictions, converting billions of dollars into digital assets that could be moved across borders without triggering traditional banking surveillance systems. But cryptocurrency was just the beginning, the proof of concept for something far more ambitious. The real revolution came with the development of AI-powered wealth management systems that could operate autonomously, making thousands of decisions per second to optimize tax efficiency, regulatory compliance, and asset protection across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. These systems don't just follow the law, they rewrite it in real time, creating new corporate structures, establishing trusts in favorable jurisdictions, and dissolving entities that become regulatory liabilities, all without human intervention. Imagine an artificial intelligence that wakes up every morning and reviews the regulatory landscape across 50 different countries. It identifies new legislation that might threaten its primary directive, protecting and growing its assigned wealth. Within minutes, it has restructured dozens of holding companies, moved assets between trusts in 3 different time zones, and established new legal entities in jurisdictions where the proposed legislation doesn't apply. By the time human regulators arrive at their offices, the AI has already adapted to neutralize any threat they might have posed. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now in family offices scattered across Manhattan, London, and Singapore. The technology exists. The legal frameworks to support it are in place, and the wealth required to implement it is concentrated in the hands of fewer than 1,000 families worldwide. These digital fortresses represent the culmination of centuries of wealth, preservation, innovation. But they also represent something far more sinister: the complete decoupling of the ultra-wealthy from any form of democratic oversight or accountability. If you're beginning to understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with here, if you're starting to see how these digital fortresses represent a fundamental threat to the very concept of economic justice, then I need you to do something. I need you to hit that like button and share this video with someone who still believes that tax policy and regulation can level the playing field. Because what you're about to learn makes those approaches seem not just inadequate, but completely obsolete. The sophistication of these AI-powered wealth management systems becomes clear when you examine their operational methodology. Traditional offshore structures relied on human decision-making, which introduced delays, errors, and most critically, audit trails that could be followed by determined investigators. The Panama Papers exposed these weaknesses dramatically when millions of documents revealed the offshore holdings of politicians, celebrities, and business leaders worldwide. The leak wasn't just embarrassing, it was educational, providing a masterclass for the ultra-wealthy on how not to structure their financial affairs. The lesson learned wasn't about moral responsibility or social obligation. It was about operational security. The families and institutions exposed by the Panama Papers weren't the most sophisticated operators. They were the ones still relying on outdated methodologies. The truly advanced wealth preservation strategies had already migrated to systems that couldn't be exposed through document leaks because the documents themselves were ephemeral, existing only as encrypted data fragments scattered across blockchain networks and deleted automatically once their purpose was served. Consider how a modern AI-powered family office operates. The system maintains no permanent records of transactions, instead generating cryptographic proofs that assets exist and movements are legitimate without creating a documentary trail that investigators could follow. Each transaction is broken down into thousands of microtransactions executed across different platforms, currencies, and jurisdictions. The AI doesn't just obscure the money trail, it makes the very concept of a money trail obsolete. The legal structures supporting these digital fortresses are equally sophisticated. Traditional trusts required human trustees who could be subpoenaed, questioned, and potentially compromised. Modern digital trusts operate with algorithmic trustees, AI entities that exist only as smart contracts on blockchain networks. These algorithmic trustees can make binding legal decisions, execute complex financial transactions, and maintain fiduciary responsibilities to their beneficiaries, but they cannot be interrogated, cannot be pressured, and cannot even be served with legal documents in any meaningful way. The regulatory arbitrage opportunities in this environment are limitless. While one jurisdiction is implementing new anti-money laundering regulations, the AI has already shifted operations to 12 other jurisdictions where those regulations don't apply. When international cooperation agreements threaten to close these loopholes, new jurisdictions emerge, often in virtual form, existing only as legal frameworks within blockchain networks that recognize no sovereign authority. The families benefiting from these structures aren't just preserving wealth, they're accumulating power at an unprecedented rate. Every dollar that escapes taxation, every asset that avoids regulation, every stream of income that remains invisible to democratic oversight represents a transfer of power from democratic institutions to private dynasties. These aren't just rich people avoiding taxes. These are the architects of a new feudal system where wealth concentration has reached levels that make historical aristocracies look egalitarian by comparison. The geopolitical implications are staggering. When the ultra-wealthy can move billions of dollars without triggering any government oversight, they become nations unto themselves, capable of influencing elections, destabilizing currencies, and reshaping international relations according to their private interests. The traditional tools of statecraft, taxation, regulation, monetary policy become impotent when wielded against adversaries who operate outside the entire framework of sovereign authority. But the true genius of these digital fortresses lies not in their ability to hide wealth, but in their capacity to generate it through methods that remain completely invisible to traditional economic analysis. AI-powered trading systems, operating with the backing of these hidden fortunes, can manipulate markets with surgical precision, creating profitable opportunities through coordinated buying and selling across thousands of financial instruments. Simultaneously, these aren't market investments in any traditional sense. They're market manipulations so sophisticated that they appear as natural market movements to human observers. The scale of this hidden economy is impossible to calculate precisely, but conservative estimates suggest that between $20 and $40 trillion worth of assets are now managed through these AI-powered digital fortress systems. This represents wealth equivalent to the combined GDP of the United States and China, operating completely outside any government oversight or democratic accountability. It's an economy within the economy, a shadow system that influences everything, while remaining invisible to everyone except its participants. Historical precedents for this level of wealth concentration don't exist, because the technological tools required to achieve it have never existed before. The closest comparison might be the era of the robber barons. But even John D. Rockefeller, at the height of his power, couldn't move money instantly across global networks, couldn't create and dissolve corporations with algorithmic precision, and couldn't operate outside government oversight with the complete impunity that modern digital fortresses provide. The families operating these systems have learned from every historical attempt to constrain concentrated wealth. They've studied the rise and fall of aristocracies, the French Revolution's assault on inherited privilege, the trust-busting era of Theodore Roosevelt, and the progressive taxation movement of the mid-20th century. Each of these historical challenges succeeded because concentrated wealth remained visible and therefore vulnerable to popular pressure and government action. Digital fortresses eliminate this vulnerability by making the wealth itself invisible. If you're still with me, if you're beginning to grasp the implications of what we're discussing, then you're ready to join a select group of people who understand how power really operates in the 21st century. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you're about to become part of an exclusive community that sees beyond the curtain, that understands the mechanisms that truly control our world. Consider this your initiation into knowledge that most people will never access, information that transforms how you view every news headline, every policy debate, every economic crisis. The cryptocurrency revolution provided these digital fortresses with their most powerful weapon yet, programmable money that exists independently of any government's control. But the crypto assets used by sophisticated family offices bear no resemblance to the Bitcoin that retail investors buy on Coinbase. These are custom-designed digital assets with built-in privacy features that make traditional cryptocurrency look transparent by comparison. Some operate on private blockchain networks accessible only to specific family offices, while others utilize quantum-resistant encryption that will remain unbreakable even as computing technology advances exponentially. The most sophisticated of these custom cryptocurrencies incorporate AI decision-making directly into their protocol layer. These aren't just digital currencies. They're autonomous economic agents capable of making complex financial decisions without human intervention. They can automatically rebalance portfolios, execute arbitrage opportunities across global markets, and even create new investment vehicles. By establishing partnerships with other AI-controlled entities operating within the same ecosystem. Consider the implications. Entire economies of AI-controlled wealth operating at machine speed, making billions of decisions per second, optimizing for outcomes that human regulators couldn't understand even if they were aware these systems existed. These eyes don't just react to market conditions. They create market conditions through coordinated actions across hundreds of financial instruments. Generating profits from volatility they themselves engineer. The regulatory landscape hasn't just failed to keep pace with these developments. It's been deliberately shaped to accommodate them. Lobbyists representing family office interests have successfully embedded themselves within the regulatory development process, ensuring that new rules contain exemptions and loopholes that make them ineffective against sophisticated digital fortress structures. The most cynical aspect of this regulatory capture is that the rules appear tough on paper while being completely impotent in practice. International coordination efforts face similar manipulation. The families operating these digital fortresses maintain influence operations within every major government, not through crude bribery or corruption, but through sophisticated networks of think tanks, academic institutions, and policy organizations that shape the intellectual framework within which regulations are developed. By the time a new international cooperation agreement is signed, its effectiveness has already been neutralized through exemptions and implementation details that favor sophisticated operators. The technology itself continues evolving at an exponential pace. Quantum computing promises to make current encryption methods obsolete, but it also opens new possibilities for wealth concealment through quantum-entangled asset storage systems that exist in superposition states until observed by authorized entities. These quantum financial instruments represent the next evolutionary step in digital fortress technology, creating assets that exist in multiple states simultaneously until their ownership is definitively established through quantum measurement. Protocols. Machine learning algorithms trained on decades of regulatory data can now predict with remarkable accuracy how governments will respond to new wealth preservation strategies, allowing family offices to stay multiple steps ahead of any regulatory response. These predictive models don't just forecast government actions. They identify the optimal timing and methodology for influencing those actions through the strategic deployment of lobbying, resources, and policy interventions. The social implications extend far beyond economics. These digital fortresses represent the infrastructure for a new form of aristocracy, one based not on noble birth or military conquest, but on technological sophistication and computational advantage. The families operating these systems aren't just preserving wealth. They're preserving power across generations through methods that make traditional hereditary privilege look democratic by comparison. Educational advantages compound these technological advantages through elite institutions that provide access to cutting-edge financial technology. Training for the children of digital fortress operators. These aren't traditional MBA programs. They're highly specialized courses in algorithmic wealth management, quantum finance, and AI-powered economic warfare, taught by practitioners who operate the most sophisticated family office systems in the world. The geographical distribution of these digital fortresses reflects the new realities of global power. While traditional financial centers like New York and London remain important, the real action has shifted to jurisdictions that embrace technological innovation while maintaining minimal regulatory oversight. Singapore has emerged as a central hub, but the most sophisticated operations are distributed across networks of micro-jurisdictions that exist primarily as legal frameworks within blockchain ecosystems. Professional services supporting these digital fortresses represent an entire shadow economy of lawyers, accountants, and technologists who specialize in maintaining systems that exist at the intersection of cutting-edge technology and legal complexity. These professionals command enormous fees and operate under strict confidentiality agreements, creating a priesthood of technical knowledge that serves only the ultra-wealthy. The arms race between wealth preservation, technology, and regulatory oversight has already been decided. Governments operate with annual budget cycles, legislative processes that require years to implement changes, and bureaucratic structures designed for oversight of traditional financial institutions. Digital fortresses operate with AI systems that adapt in real time, quantum encrypted communications that can't be intercepted, and legal structures that exist across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. It's not a fair fight. It's not even the same game. The philosophical implications challenge fundamental assumptions about justice, democracy, and social organization. If wealth can be made completely invisible and untouchable, then traditional concepts of taxation, regulation, and democratic accountability become meaningless. These digital fortresses don't just preserve wealth inequality, they institutionalize it through technological means that appear neutral but serve exclusively the interests of those sophisticated enough to deploy them. What we're witnessing isn't just tax avoidance or regulatory arbitrage. It's the emergence of a parallel economic system that operates according to rules written by and for the ultra-wealthy. This system doesn't seek to reform or improve the traditional economy. It seeks to transcend it entirely, creating a realm where the laws of physics and mathematics matter more than the laws of governments. The network effects of these digital fortresses create exponential advantages for their operators. Each family office that joins the ecosystem increases the sophistication and effectiveness of the entire network, creating collaborative opportunities for market manipulation, regulatory arbitrage, and economic influence that multiply the power of individual participants. These aren't just wealthy families. They're nodes in a distributed network of economic power that operates according to protocols designed to maximize collective advantage. Cultural shifts within ultra-wealthy families reflect the transition from traditional wealth preservation to digital fortress strategies. Older generations who built fortunes through conventional business operations often struggle to understand the technological sophistication of modern wealth preservation, creating generational tensions within family structures. Younger family members trained in AI and blockchain technologies increasingly view traditional approaches as quaint anachronisms that expose the family to unnecessary regulatory risks. The recruitment and retention of technical talent capable of operating these systems has created an entirely new category of highly compensated specialists. These aren't traditional financial advisors. They're technologists with deep expertise in artificial intelligence, cryptography, and complex systems design. They command enormous salaries and equity stakes in family office operations, creating a new class of ultra-wealthy individuals whose fortunes derive entirely from their ability to operate digital fortress systems. Intelligence gathering operations conducted by sophisticated family offices rival those of nation-states in their scope and effectiveness. AI-powered monitoring systems track regulatory developments, political changes, and economic indicators across hundreds of jurisdictions simultaneously, providing early warning of threats to wealth preservation strategies. These systems don't just collect public information. They analyze communication patterns, social media sentiment, and even satellite imagery to predict policy changes before they're announced. The timing of this technological revolution couldn't be more significant, as democratic institutions worldwide face challenges to their legitimacy and effectiveness. The ultra-wealthy have developed tools that make them completely independent of democratic oversight. These digital fortresses don't just insulate their operators from government action. They provide platforms for influencing government action through economic pressure that operates too quickly and too subtly for traditional oversight mechanisms to detect. If you've made it this far, if you're beginning to understand the true scope of what we're dealing with, then you're part of an elite group of people who see the world as it really is, not as we're told it should be. I need you to prove your understanding by commenting with the word invisible and sharing this video with someone who still believes that voting and protests and regulatory reform can solve wealth inequality. Because what you've learned today reveals that those approaches aren't just inadequate, they're designed to fail, to provide the illusion of democratic participation while real power operates in digital fortresses that exist beyond any democratic reach. The endpoint of this technological evolution isn't difficult to predict. As artificial intelligence systems become more sophisticated, as quantum computing becomes more accessible, as blockchain networks become more complex, the gap between those who operate digital fortresses and those who remain subject to traditional economic constraints will become insurmountable. We're not heading toward greater wealth inequality. We're heading toward wealth inequality so extreme that it represents a different form of human organization entirely. The families operating these systems aren't just preserving wealth, they're preserving civilization itself according to their private vision of what civilization should become. They're not subject to democratic input because they operate outside democratic reach. They're not constrained by national borders because they exist in digital spaces that recognize no sovereignty except mathematical proof and cryptographic security. This isn't a conspiracy in any traditional sense because it requires no coordination, no secret meetings, no shared ideology beyond the desire to preserve and expand inherited advantages. The technology itself creates the coordination. The AI systems themselves align the interests. The mathematical protocols themselves ensure cooperation without requiring trust or communication between participants. What emerges from this technological evolution is something unprecedented in human history, a form of aristocracy based purely on algorithmic advantage, a ruling class that rules not through force or ideology, but through computational superiority and technological sophistication. These aren't robber barons or traditional oligarchs. There's something entirely new, a digital aristocracy that operates according to rules. They wrote themselves in programming languages that governments can't read, and mathematical proofs that courts can't interpret. The ultimate irony is that this technological revolution was enabled by the same democratic institutions that it now renders obsolete. Universities funded by taxpayers developed the artificial intelligence technologies that power these systems. Government research programs created the internet infrastructure that enables global wealth transfer. Democratic societies nurtured the technological innovation that made digital fortresses possible. And in doing so, they created the tools of their own irrelevance. Understanding this reality requires abandoning comfortable illusions about fairness, justice, and democratic governance. The game has changed so fundamentally that continuing to play by old rules guarantees continued defeat. These digital fortresses don't represent a temporary distortion of economic systems that will eventually be corrected through political action. They represent the permanent establishment of a new form of social organization that makes traditional concepts of political action irrelevant. The choice facing society isn't between equality and inequality, between fair and unfair economic systems, between democratic and authoritarian governance. The choice is between understanding the new realities of power and remaining trapped in obsolete frameworks that provide comfort but no genuine insight into how the world actually operates. These digital fortresses aren't aberrations to be corrected. They're the new normal to be understood, adapted to, or transcended through means that haven't yet been invented. What I've revealed to you today exists in the shadowed intersections of technology, law, and power, where the future of human civilization is being written by algorithms that serve interests so concentrated, so sophisticated, and so insulated from democratic oversight that they represent something entirely new in human experience, These aren't just rich people hiding money. They're the architects of a new form of social organization that makes traditional concepts of wealth, power, and governance look like primitive relics from a simpler age. The digital fortresses protecting the wealth of the future elite aren't just financial structures. They're the foundations of whatever form of civilization emerges from the ruins of democratic capitalism. Understanding them requires abandoning every comfortable assumption about how power operates, how justice functions, and how human societies organize themselves around shared resources and common goals. What remains when those assumptions fall away is a reality so stark, so unprecedented, and so perfectly engineered that it challenges the very possibility of human societies based on anything other than algorithmic advantage and computational power. This is the world we now inhabit, whether we understand it or not. These digital fortresses aren't coming. They're here, operating in the shadows of our awareness, shaping every aspect of economic reality while remaining invisible to traditional analysis. The question isn't whether this system is fair or just or sustainable. The question is whether human societies can develop new forms of organization, sophisticated enough to exist alongside technological aristocracies that operate according to rules written in mathematics rather than negotiated through democratic processes. The future belongs to those who understand these new realities, who adapt to technological change rather than resisting it, who build systems sophisticated enough to operate in the same realm as digital fortresses, rather than pretending they don't exist. Everything else is nostalgia for a world that has already ended, mourning for democratic institutions that lost their relevance the moment artificial intelligence learned to move money faster than governments could track it. Welcome to the age of digital fortresses, where wealth doesn't just buy power, but exists as power itself, encoded in algorithms that recognize no authority except mathematical proof and serve no master except those sophisticated enough to program their own liberation from every constraint that democracy ever dared to impose.